The Earnestly Speaking podcast is a show that is founded on free-flowing conversation and may at times venture into mature subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
Earnest Speaking podcast coming to you on December 2nd, 2020. It is the final month of this disastrous year, also known as, to many folks, 2020. Of course, this podcast you can find on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and as I've been saying for the last about month and a half now, we are now on Amazon Music. So, how you guys doing? It's been about a little over a week since we last recorded a show. I think last week was the pre-Thanksgiving show. Took a couple days there. I guess real quick, before we get to the topics I'm talking about here, I relaunched recently being yesterday, relaunched the Earnestly Speaking Unfiltered podcast. If you guys have been following me the last couple of years and whatnot, I off and on had like a B-side. It was much more topic-centric, more in the moment kind of show. And it was really kind of something just to motivate me to do more every day. Like, I could always leave this, that content. And by the way, that content typically is about 10, maybe 50 minutes or less. But we try to get it to one topic quickly. Like, I guess I'm going to call it a rant. No production. Really just get it and get out. Like, I typically do those on the road when I have to, set up shop here at home. If I could just, put in 5 minutes of time into a topic I want to get out there, or a take, or whatever, maybe, I could just do that. I could do it anywhere on my phone, whatever, maybe. Sometimes it'd be here. Sometimes it'd be done right here in this, in my office. But I stopped doing the show, that show, Unfiltered, I think either early this year or late last year, just because I didn't have time to record. I kind of got burnt out for a while doing all these podcasts I was doing for a while. Then I figured at the time, I was like, well, I'm going to be talking about this stuff on the regular show anyway. And now we're back to doing, this show's kind of gotten to a point where there's a groove here. We have the solo shows like today's, for example, where I check in every couple of days, whatever it may be. Or, obviously the guests that come on the show, that's all the people that are surrounding this show. And which, by the way, I'm grateful for, to have a round table or a atmosphere of people who are regulars who come on this podcast to talk shop with me about anything, whether it be sports, politics, pop culture, you name it, music. It's really cool to have that, and I like that. But there are a lot of things too in the moment that I like to react to sometimes, and sometimes certain topics deserve its own space. And I'm also against the idea of stuffing all this stuff on this feed. Like, I wanted to clutter it. I try to avoid cluttering the feed, So rather than doing that, create a space for the smaller mini podcast, what I call it, or as I described earlier, it's kind of like a B-side of the show. So you can subscribe also to Earnestly Speaking Unfiltered, which is, again, on all the same podcast platforms as mentioned about this one. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Google Podcasts, Amazon. It should be on Amazon now, I think. I just put it up yesterday. Yesterday's show, the first episode I did on that, I recorded, it was focused on the disastrous and abomination that is the NFC East. I want to get that out there in the open. Probably do another one, probably today, tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so Thanksgiving is in the rearview mirror. Well, a week removed. This week's on my fast, actually. We're in December. We did our tree today. Actually, my wife and I, our kids, and then my mother-in-law and brother-in-law came over to do the tree. It was pretty cool, actually. Did a lot of lights. Put some lights around the house, a little bit too. Inside the house, of course, nothing outside. That was really fun. We had a good time for about an hour or 2 hours. It was really cool. Thanksgiving 2020 for me was pretty quiet. I said in the last show too, especially, that I really have learned to appreciate the smaller Thanksgivings we've had. Being raised in a Caribbean family from Trinidad, we've always had really big festive celebrations, with a lot of people. It wasn't just immediate family, it was cousins and, whatnot on both sides, dad's side, mom's side. So I was so used to that. Whereas my wife's family is much smaller than mine. In fact, my wife's family now today consists of just really her mom and her brother. Since we're losing, my father-in-law passed away a couple years ago, obviously. Rest in peace, Chuck, of course. And, so we have that. We've had smaller ones and through the years. So traditionally what we've done, prior to COVID, prior to this year, we will always do our stuff first here at home. Especially now we have kids. We do our, small Thanksgiving fellowship here with our family, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law. And we'll do breakfast in the morning, watch the parade, which by the way, the parade this year was kind of interesting, actually. Some of it's pre-recorded. There's not much live going on, obviously, because there's no crowds are allowed, whatever. But it was pretty interesting. I actually kind of enjoyed it. We woke up in the morning, got the kids up, we made breakfast by 8:45 in the morning. I think my wife made blintzes. Anybody does not know what that is? That is pancakes with cottage cheese and strawberries and whatever. I'm not a big fan of it. My wife, my mother-in-law loves that stuff, so that's their thing. I, of course, made the traditional scrambled eggs and toast and bacon and all that. So we had a good time. We did that breakfast in the morning. We wake an hour or two, and then we had our lunch. And we don't typically cook a lot anyway, because it's just 6. But this year we did a little more than we've done in the past. Obviously we have the ham. We're not big on turkey, so my mother-in-law likes turkey, so she'll bring her own turkey. But we made, my wife made a southern mac and cheese pie, which was great. We had sweet potato pie, apple pie for me, of course, a couple other things. It was really good. We had a good time. It was really quiet. And normally when we do this, we in a normal year, we'll have the small one, wait a couple hours, maybe relax, and then in the evening go to either my mom's house or go to my dad's house, or maybe my aunt's is doing something. We'll go there. This year we just stayed in, and we stayed in. Well, mainly I like the fact we stayed in too because number one, I'm tired, I'm old, I'm 40 years old, but also in my place of employment, while a lot of people are relaxing on taking like mini vacations and Thanksgiving weekend, in the casino industry. Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend is one of our, if not our busiest weekend of the year. So Black Friday is huge for us. So I wanted to kind of relax and kind of just be the calm before the storm, before we had to go to work and really bust our asses a weekend, which we did, of course. I'm feeling it in my body too. But we did that, and it was good. So Thanksgiving was quiet. We watched, the kids wanted the TV, so I was able to put football on the tablet to watch. And of course we work all weekend. It was good. We had a good time. It was quiet. I liked it. Only negative really of Thanksgiving this year. My oldest son obviously was a little bit issues there. We had to deal with that. He was a little negative on the negative side, but that's kind of the things you deal with. We deal with that as parents. Kids sometimes aren't going to receive this as much. I think he's taking the pandemic very hard because he still do virtual schooling. He hasn't seen any of his friends since before March. He's seen very little of his cousins that live down here, and then his cousins he's really close to, my sister's kids, Christina, her kids, they haven't seen him since last year. I think it was February or January they came down here before COVID, and now good news, they're coming down to visit later this month for 2 weeks, so my kid will probably spend some time there with them. I think my sister already said she'll take him for a weekend just to kind of, because he really needs it, honestly. He really needs time away from me and the wife, and even his brother. He doesn't have an outlet. There's not much outlets from him now. He's very personable. He's an extrovert. He likes to be around people, loves to have fun, and when you don't have that to do, and obviously because we're doing that because of safety measures and COVID and all that, it does mess with you. A lot of kids are struggling with this stuff, my kid included. So it's gonna be, it's fascinating time. So we'll see how that works out. But all in all, Thanksgiving 2020 was a success. So anyway, I am still, even now, a month removed from the election, although it was called a couple days later. I am still fascinated with Donald Trump. Obviously, I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for him in 2016. Didn't vote for him this year. And he'll be gone from the presidency as our commander in chief in about 6 weeks, January 20th, 2021, next year. And but I'm fascinated by this guy, and it's funny because even he's been much quiet post-election because he's been pretty much trying to fight the results, in some courts and appeals courts, and trying to get recounts, which he did, and still lost. And I'm just so fascinated with the future of Donald Trump. Like I've been, it's pretty much told that, and I agree that once he leaves the White House in January of next year, he's going to probably be in media, probably do his own platform, Trump TV, that kind of thing. I really believe that's going to happen. But I'm really curious about how things are going to be handled, because a lot of people think that he's going to try to run again in 2024, which he could. And I think the odds are actually lower than people really give credit for. I think he'll dangle that idea of running for re-election in 2024 up until he can't anymore. But I don't think he will do it solely because of the fact that he'll be 78, I think 79 when he gets if he were to run. I'm not saying that obviously Joe Biden's the same age right currently, but I think Donald Trump will have other things to set his eyes on by 2024. But he's fascinating because obviously Trump mania, and just the fervor around him, he still has a stronghold of the Republican Party. He still does. I've been locked in discussions recently on my Facebook with old friends of mine. This is kind of, one day I'm going to do an episode about my upbringing in the church and how I've progressed from where I was as a teenager to now. But, it's, I'm in discussions with people who voted for Trump, and, we've had some disagreements, obviously, about how this is being handled. And we're having these discussions, post-election about all these challenges and the, post-election, quote-unquote fraud and all that. And, I will say it again. Is it possible fraud has existed in this election, any other election? Yeah, I'm sure. But to flip it, to where it's that Trump would actually won enough votes? No, I don't believe that at all. I think it's intellectually dishonest to have this discussion about that. And yet this person who I respected, I don't know if I can say the same today, unfortunately, nice person. I won't go mentioning names because he or she might listen to this podcast and want to say something. And I'm not trying to further this discussion really more than it is. This person believes that this is a conspiracy, that this is deep state, even though the evidence says otherwise. Bill Barr and Donald Trump appointed Justice Department have said they don't see enough fraud to flip this election. And yet they still are convinced that, this person keeps telling me, listen, watch these hearings. I'm watching these hearings and I'm looking at these hearings and there's no judge there. It's not a hearing. It's a round table. So it's the disconnect. And, I don't blame Donald Trump for this, though. I really don't. I blame the people who follow him because, again, I am big across the board on any level on personal accountability. You want to decide to follow this guy down the road, that's on you. You made it a decision. I'm not blaming Trump for that. I'm blaming you for that. And, it's just, it's funny because a lot of these people who I grew up with, and whether or not we have similar or different political views, I used to think that some of them were at least sensical, and no, there's some of them that's gone off the beaten path, in my opinion. It's really sad. I'm not going to blame Trump for that. Oh, Trump, what did he do? No, I am big on personal accountability. You decide the life you want to live. But this person, it's just fascinating how the stronghold Trump has with this party. He or she is like just convinced that Donald Trump, got cheated and this, this fraud, and yet there's no proof of this stuff. I just, it's fascinating. It really is, and it's fascinating because I'm fascinated with Donald Trump also, and his future, what he's going to do. There's a lot of litigation out there, or potential litigation out there for Donald Trump once he doesn't have the security of being the president of the United States. And he's pardoning people, pardoning Michael Flynn. He's thinking about pardoning his kids, which, by the way, is kind of weird because the kids haven't even gotten in trouble for anything yet. Although there's probably some litigation or potential litigation in the future over his kids. I think also Rudy Giuliani, but we discussed Giuliani last week's podcast, so we will have to go there. But Donald Trump, man, I'm still fascinated. I'm thinking I'm more fascinated now than I was before he got into the political arena. He's a fascinating guy. Watch his rallies and just watch how he behaves, and he's a interesting case study. He really is, and we're not done with him. Whether you like it or not, we're not done with Donald Trump. He's gonna be a part of our lives. He won't be in a powerful position anymore. He'll be more so in an influential position in terms of furthering the Republican Party down to wherever they're going to go next. But yeah, I find myself more fascinated with him now. And this whole thing, and again, I'm getting this dialogue with this person on my social media, on my Facebook page, and I didn't want to continue. Out of respect, I didn't really insult this person at all. Just told her I disagree with this person, and they came back with oh, you're disgusting because you don't agree with me. I'm like, wait. So you think I want to discuss a person because you gave me information, and I actually took the time to look at the information you gave me, and I say, no, this is not real. I don't believe this. So I'm disgusting now because of that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so, and this person is supposed to be claimed to be a Christian and all that. It's ridiculous, man. It really is. Again, I'm not gonna mention any names. If you do follow me on Facebook, you probably know who I'm talking about. But I'm not gonna out this person because it's not worth it. It's not worth it. But yeah, well, this is about 6 weeks ago to inauguration of Joe Biden. This whole thing. I mean, I'm telling you, it's Donald Trump is just a fascinating individual, man. He really is, and he does have his clamps over this party. Yeah. So I don't know. It's what it is. Anyway, yesterday, I read an interesting article in ESPN's The Undefeated website. It was actually written by an old friend of mine, a person who's been on this podcast, on my old radio show many times over back in 2013-14, Justin Tinsley. Phenomenal writer, phenomenal everything he does. One of the best writers I've ever read. He used to be a regular in the podcast, like I said. He wrote an interesting article about Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor would have been 80 years old yesterday, or this week. And it was focused on Richard Pryor's interview he did with Robert Walters back in 1986. Richard Pryor is one of the most fascinating, most talented, yet one of the most tragic figures in all of pop culture and all of Hollywood. I've always been a big fan of Richard Pryor. In fact, he's one of my two favorite comedians of all time. Him and Eddie Murphy share that real estate. I mean, many would argue that he's the GOAT. He's the standard of stand-up comedy, and I would definitely not push back on that. I think he is the standard. He's amazing, but a lot of his comedy and a lot of what his art and what he did also came from pain, and a lot of the things that he was known for doing or did to himself and hurt his body. He had multiple sclerosis. He died in 2005. But the article here is focused on the interview that he did with Barbara Walters back in 1986. He had, at that time, he had another kid. He was married for the fourth time. This is his fifth kid with 4 wives. And he was at the time, I believe, 46 years old. I think he was definitely his mid-40s. And he was very transparent and honest. And I think that's the thing about this interview with Richard Pryor that was astounding, especially in 1986. Yeah, he called out himself on things he did. He apologized for things he did. He admitted that he was a a woman beater, wife abuser, want to call it. He hit women. He had a major drug problem, major cocaine problem. He was suicidal. A lot of issues. He supposedly got molested as a child also too. So he had a lot of demons to deal with. He died at age 65, like I said. And I gotta tell you, when you look at his life and how he was and just how everything happened to him, it's actually quite amazing he lived that long, honestly. And he would have been 80 this week. The interview is on YouTube. If you look at the article, it's on. I might put a link up actually on this show at the end of this podcast of the article, because it's a phenomenal article, again, written by my friend Justin Tinsley of ESPN's Undefeated. It was a very fascinating stuff. And yeah, he was just very honest. You can see, he's there with his young son and his wife at the time, and it was uncomfortable times to watch, but you couldn't stop watching. It was this one of those things you couldn't take your eyes off it. But Richard Pryor was one of the great talents of our time, of any genre, any race. Like I said, he's definitely the Mount Rushmore of comedians. That's not even a conversation. So yeah, I'll probably try to post this on the link of the article on the description part of this podcast after. So, but yeah, check it out. ESPN Undefeated. What else? So it's been last couple weeks for me and my wrestling intake. I've actually fallen behind on a lot of wrestling content the last couple weeks, and there's a lot of reasons why. And there's many reasons why this has happened, honestly. First off, the election didn't help leading up to that. All my focus in early November was around the election and the aftermath and all that. But I spoke on this podcast a couple, either last episode or a couple episodes before this, about my challenge of trying to balance content, watching content. That's why I stopped going on social media as much. I wanted to watch all the content. There's a lot of stuff like on HBO Max I want to watch, and stuff with podcasts I listen to, books I want to read and all that. And there's a lot of things that, it's hard to balance, and you balance in that under a backdrop of children and wife and work and just everything else around that. And I'm simple. Like, I don't really want from a lot. Like, give me a place to read a book, to listen to a podcast, to do a podcast. I'm good. I'm simple. Like, I'm very simple. But wrestling content has suffered, actually. I missed this past week's Take 3 Wrestling podcast with Mike and Joe, because I had to do help my son with his Thanksgiving project that was due the next day. So a lot of things have been in the way of accomplishing things I want to do. You guys know I love AEW. I'm a big AEW mark, but yet AEW, I haven't watched an episode of Dynamite in 2 weeks. And as we're recording right now, I'm missing the third episode in 3 weeks. And I've discussed in the past, on the show with some of the, James Neese of the world and Ray Moraldi's of the world that come on the podcast, at some point, do you cut your losses? Because, like I said, in terms of wrestling, there's really, for me, the main shows of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, the WWE brand, of course, and then, AEW. Do you cut your losses? Because all those shows combined, really, combined 9 hours. 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, 2 hours of NXT. That's actually 3, 5, 7, and 2 hours of Dynamite. Now, luckily, Hulu has the edited versions of Raw, which is down from 3 hours to an hour and a half. NXT is edited from an hour and a half to an hour. And then you have Dynamite for 2 hours, which was really an hour and a half if you watch it on demand. And same with SmackDown, hour and a half without the commercials on demand. This is how I normally watch it anyway. I don't watch any of these shows live because it's too much. Like right now, I could watch Dynamite, but I would choose not to because I'd rather record a podcast. I'll watch it tomorrow. But it's been tough to really keep up. It really has. So do you cut your losses? Like, I have not missed an episode of Dynamite since this show was launched last October. And now I'm contemplating the idea of actually just saying, well, fuck it. I left a lot. Didn't watch the last 2 shows. Just cut my losses and just start from scratch from here. Same thing with Raw and SmackDown and NXT. I haven't watched, any of those shows in a couple of weeks as well, too. But a lot of it, too, also is that I'm not motivated to watch it because I'm watching other things as well, too. I'm still finishing the circus. I start from the beginning. I'm still have documentaries I want to watch. It's audiobooks I'm dying to read. I want to get the new Barack Obama book soon. And there's so much things I want to do and I want to listen to and just dive into, and articles to read, and I have Pockets, the Pocket app, where you could save articles, there's things I put aside to read, for the New York Times, Washington Post, or different sites that I'm into, tech sites or pop culture sites I'm into. I want to read, and that's piling up too, and I don't have any time to do that. I have podcasts I'm dying to listen to, like listening to on that it's hard. It's gotten harder. So you got to cut your losses somewhere. So do I go back and watch the weeks I've missed of wrestling, or do I just go ahead and say, well, screw it, I missed it, and then, just, take what you can now, and hopefully they recap the things that, you missed on, and which normally does happen anyway with their shows. But I like watching it, within a certain amount of time, As I said, my buddy Big Jim, our friend here at the pocket, Big Jim, he says all the time that if he doesn't watch a show within 48 hours of it airing, he just cuts his losses and moves on to the next one. I may have to start doing that, treating it like sports. Like, I miss football games all the time. I'm not gonna stop. I'm not gonna all of a sudden go back to watching football games. Same with this year the NFL. Because I don't have Red Zone this year for the second year in a row. I'm watching only the games I can that's on television other than the Dolphins. Obviously, the Dolphins are on because it's my region, but whatever game is in my region on Fox or CBS, and occasionally the Sunday night game, occasionally the Monday night game, but I've actually been using, this is kind of where NFL primetime has kind of been clutch for me, because NFL primetime, which returned last year, with Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, and this year it's Chris Berman and Booger McFarland, who's done. By the way, he's done a great job. That guy gets really criticized last year, especially doing Monday Night Football. But Booger has done a great job with Chris Berman. I actually have been really impressed with him on the show this year, and I've used NFL Primetime as a way to catch up on seeing highlights of games I'd missed. Because with Red Zone, when I used to watch Red Zone 24/7, I used to be that NFL fan that was locked in 24/7. I didn't need to recap shows because I already watched the games, so I don't need to watch recaps. Now I'm relying on recap games. I haven't watched a lot of New York Giants games this year because that have been shown a lot of my region, because number one, they're not that good for starters. So I haven't been able to watch that. So the NFL primetime has kind of been, clutch for me, where I can recap all the games of the weekend and watch them in one swoop and be good with that. But I'm trying to figure out whether it's worth catching up on or cutting my losses. And, I don't know. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. I'm leaning towards cutting my losses, to be honest with you, because what's the point? I'm not gonna watch everything. I'm not gonna. There are times when I miss certain shows. It happens. I miss certain games. So I think what I'm trying to say here, more than anything else, is I should start treating my pro wrestling content watching like I treat sports. I'm not gonna go back and watch every single TNT game I missed, on a Thursday or Tuesday. So why am I gonna do the same with wrestling? Just do the same, and they'll catch up on you anyway. The story never ends anyway. So maybe I'll cut my losses. Maybe I'll just start up this week and turn over a new leaf, Anyway, find before I go. Lately, music-wise, I've been kind of going back into my little library. Last, say 5 days, 7 days, whatever. Been listening to a lot of Mudvayne. Anybody who loves metal, Mudvayne, debuted in, they started in 1996, but their first album debuted in 2000, LD50 album. Mudvayne is kind of like the prog metal, math metal band. Phenomenal. Really good band. Love the first two albums, LD50 and the thing of all things, the end of all things, rather. Been listening to a lot of that lately. My connection to the band, of course, is the fact not I'm personally connected, but when I played music with my old band, Sense of Being, back in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s rather, our band was compared to them in a lot of ways because the way they sounded, the vocals, Chad Gray, vocalist, and the guitars and the sound and all that. The only thing difference between Sense of Being and Mudvayne was that me being a bass player, I was a much more basic bass player than Ryan Martini, who's the bass player for Mudvayne, and he slaps the bass and he plays all these chords and all that stuff. He's phenomenal. I could never get like him. But I've been listening to him a lot lately, just cause I've been trying to going back and diving into some of my old discography of bands I listened to back in the day. And this is the weird thing about when you get older and you have kids in the family is that and I spoke about this I think early in the year, you start forgetting who you are or who you used to be, because again, that life, once you're married with children and you're doing the whole rinse repeat thing every day, obviously everything's the same every single day, you start forgetting what did you used to be like before that. I used to listen to a lot of music. I mean, back in the day, and granted, music's to me, I would say still more important to me than sports. But there was a time where music was the only thing that mattered to me, being in the band. Sports took a back seat. I didn't give a shit about sports. I mean, I did give a shit, but music came first. And not just playing it and being in the studio or writing music with my guys. I'm talking about trying to track bands down, see what bands are doing this, local bands that, and trying to be in the know what's going on. So I've been slowly trying to see what I used to do. And I don't know, Mudvayne came up, and I started playing Mudvayne the last couple of days, and I can't stop listening to the band. I've listened to them for now. Granted, they're a band I think really didn't get to their full potential. Honestly, they as much traction they got. They were on radio. They had a couple of hits on radio, so they got some traction. But I don't think that band never reached their full potential. And honestly, they stopped really. I mean, granted, some of the later albums weren't that great, but they still had a chance to really break through. There's a lot of bands that while you thought they were big in the moment, you look back, it's yeah, that band was good, but they could have been bigger or better. Mudvayne's one of those bands, actually, in my opinion, that could have been bigger. Honestly, because they're really talented, and I mean, they're on radio. Chad Gray, they broke up. They didn't break up. They went on hiatus in 2011, and really never done anything. They haven't really officially broken up. There was rumors about them probably coming back and doing stuff, but a couple of years ago, but that never came to fruition. Chad Gray is still doing his work with the band Hell Yeah. That was with Vinnie Paul, who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately. Of Pantera fame. That's also the brother of Dimebag Darrell as well. And look, I don't think it's Hell Yeah personally. I'm not a big fan of theirs. But to me, Mudvayne was leaps and bounds better than Hell Yeah. This on raw talent. I'm not knocking. Now, granted, Hell Yeah is a super band anyway, but you could have done both. I mean, Mudvayne was that good. I mean, to me, it feels like a wasted time. I feel like a little bit of a waste that Mudvayne never got to the potential or never continued. They were here, and then were gone. Chad Gray, he keeps saying about, when it's time, he keeps talking about this idea. People talk about the idea of them coming back, and Chad Gray is making excuses. Look, if you don't want Mudvayne to come back, just say you don't want him to come back. Don't bullshit yourself here saying, well, this and this project and the guys and I are good, we just can't see it on the same page. Look, if you don't want to come back, don't come back. Be honest, though. I feel like they're letting that thing hang. But at the same time, time's of the essence. If you want to do the music, do the fucking music. But don't bullshit people who support you and this and that. And say, oh, I don't know, and this and that, and the guys are cool, this and that. I don't know. But Mudvayne's first two albums, I would say 3 albums, because I actually love, Lost and Found was this third album that came out in 2005, and I actually enjoyed it. I can see why people didn't like it, because it kind of went away from what they were doing, what they did, progressive math metal to more straightforward rock. But I thought it was a good record. It has a couple good songs on there. But Yeah, miss Mudvayne. I missed them. It was one of those bands I miss also, and a band I thought didn't really hit their potential just because they chose not to. They decided to stop. I don't know. So anyway, I'll cut it for now. Edit there again. I'm on Twitter, EGChristian7. Again, as far as this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, all that. So, I guess that's it. Till then, next episode. We'll talk soon. All right. Later.